Hey, so it is mid-March, and that means it is go time in this greenhouse. It is time to get the plants seeded that you need to seed indoors ahead of time to get them ready for planting outside in the garden once the growing season hits. So mid-March is really primo time because a lot of seeds need to be planted between 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost date. So in Madison, Wisconsin, we are in what's called Zone 5. The smaller number zones, the smaller the number, the colder the climate, the higher the number, the warmer the climate. So once you get into like zone 8, 9, 10, you are like a frost-free zone. You're like talking about Georgia, things like that. But in Wisconsin, right now in Madison, Wisconsin, we are a zone 5, which means our average first frost date in the fall is October 10th. That means about when temperatures start going below freezing at night. And our last frost date in the spring is around May 10th. And that means after May 10th, it's unlikely temps are going to drop below freezing. And so that is usually go time for getting your plants out into the garden. You just have to also watch the forecast because it's Wisconsin. You may have noticed it's 70 degrees last week. We're going to have a giant snowstorm coming up. So it can be a little bit of a roller coaster. That's an average frost date, May 10th. So check the weather before you plant. Don't plant your plants out when you're about to have a snowstorm. But it's really easy to tell when to plant by looking at a calendar. So this is how we do this with our students. We highlight that last frost date in the spring, and we highlight the first frost date in the fall. And we learn that there's about 150 days between those two frost dates. That's our growing season. And how you can tell when to plant is so easy, y'all. If you get a seed packet, you look on the back of your seed packet. It says start indoors in a warm, well-lighted area 6 to 8 weeks before planting outdoors. That means before that last frost date. So if you look at your calendar and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that gets you to March 15th, which is about right about now. So this is why it's time to get these things going in the greenhouse. If you don't have a greenhouse, you can still start seeds inside. Just make sure that you have a light source. Either put them in a southern facing window or get a grow light. Make sure you keep those seeds moist until they sprout up, and then keep an eye on them and water them as needed until they get big enough and we hit that last frost date and you can safely put them out in the garden. So one thing too to know about seeds is there are different kinds of seeds. If a seed is what's called open pollinated, you'll see nothing on the seed packet that says hybrid. You'll see nothing on the seed packet that says GMO. You'll just see the name of the vegetable. Open pollinated means these are seeds that if you plant the crop, you can save seeds from the vegetables or the seed pods of that crop to save your own seeds to plant the following season. Open pollinated crops are great to grow if you're going to be saving your seeds. So if you are planning on that, make sure you get yourself some open pollinated crops. If you get hybrid crops, that means those are plants that were bred by two parent plants with different traits and their offspring look a certain kind of way. But if you save seeds from that offspring, that hybrid baby, you might get seeds that represent this parent or this parent. You might not get ones that look just like that hybrid that you took the seeds from. So that's something to know if you're seed saving. If it says heirloom seeds on your seed packet, that means it's an open pollinated variety that has been saved over generations for at least 50 years to select for the traits that whoever was saving those seeds wanted. So if like you have a spinach plant and it is a beautiful spinach plant that's leaves are ready way before the other spinach plants in your row, you might consider it, instead of picking that spinach, let that one go to seed so you can collect those seeds and have that trait of that early harvest in your next season's crop when you plant them. So saving seeds is a whole nother topic. We'll do a whole nother workshop on that. But I encourage y'all to try it. It is really puts the superpower of growing your own food directly in your hands instead of supporting the big seed corporations that have tried to take the thousands and thousands and thousands of varieties of crops that people used to grow and turn them into like a handful of crops that they can sell you with the lie that you have to buy seeds every single year from the seed companies. So watch out for that. All right, so there are some other secret informations on your seed packet that you might want to know. So if you flip it over again, it will say something like 75 days to harvest, or it can also say 75 days to maturity. And what that means is from when you plant your seed to when you will be able to harvest your very first crops. So if you're trying to plan your garden and you're thinking when you might expect to harvest, that can tell you that piece. The depth tells you how deep to plant your seed, but there's also a rule of thumb that's really easy. If you plant the seed twice as deep as the seed is big, that's generally deep enough. One thing that beginning gardeners sometimes do is plant your seeds too deep, and that's why they don't germinate. So watch out for that. It also will say spacing or rows between, some kind of language about how far to space your plants. That means for the mature plants how much room they'll need. So this tomato plant needs 18 to 24 inches to grow. So when you're planting out in your garden, sometimes it's easy to plant things too close together because they look so small. They're like, you can pack it in. And then in the middle of the summer when you have a 3-foot wide tomato plant 6 inches from your next 3-foot wide tomato plant, you're going to have a jungle situation going on. So make sure you think about that when you're planting too. A lot of plants that you start in the greenhouse are plants that take a long time to grow. So we got to get a jump on the growing season in Wisconsin. So if you check out too, plants that are in the same plant family often have similar growing needs. So if you look at tomato seeds, pepper seeds, eggplant seeds, these all look really similar. The seeds, they are in the same plant family. They're in the tomato family. They all like to be started inside in Wisconsin to get a jump on that growing season. Hot peppers we usually start in February or early March. Tomatoes we usually start in mid to late March. Eggplants we usually start in February to early March. So look at your seed packet to see when to plant, but those are some that do like to be planted early. If you go out after May 10th to plant those seeds directly in your garden, they might not get all the way to maturity before the end of the growing season. So just to keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind when you're seeding, crops that you eat the roots of, you should not start in pots inside because that root will go down and bump the bottom of the pot and be like, what am I supposed to do now? And so these should be directly sowed out into the garden. In general, crops you eat the roots of or the leaves of are crops that can handle some frost. So these you can actually plant out in the garden around mid-April. Even though you haven't hit that last frost date yet, the temperatures aren't going to get too low to disrupt these cold hardy plants. So if you look on the back of the seed packet too, it should say, if it's not a plant that you can start inside, it should say direct sow. That means plant directly out in your garden. And right here it says, as soon as the soil can be worked. So that's when the soil is unfrozen and ready. So honestly, it looks like we could plant our carrots out there right now because the weather has been so whacked out this spring. Some plants I don't plant inside because they just are happier with cooler weather and they can easily be sowed directly outside. Spinach is one of those. Turnip greens is one of those. Mustard greens is one of those. Cilantro is one of those. These are all crops that I direct sow out in the garden. And then the root crops. So carrots, beets, radishes. Those are things you can all start seeding directly out in the garden mid-April. Another thing to know is that cucumber family plants, if you look at these seeds, cucumbers, squash, pumpkins, they all have a really similar looking seed. Those are all in the cucumber family. Watermelons are included in here too, cantaloupe. These seeds are a little fussy about getting their roots messed with once the seedlings start to grow. So I usually just wait until May 10th and then I'll plant them directly out in the garden. If you want to start them inside, you can consider planting them in like a compostable pot so that you can just plant the pot and all right in the garden and it can just rot and those roots won't get messed with. You can get away with it if you're careful. If you are, though, I will wait to plant them until about 4 weeks before your last frost date because they really like the heat. So they're going to benefit from getting planted a little later when it's a little hotter, even in your greenhouse or inside. Some other plants to check out, plant families, if you look at Swiss chard, beets, and spinach, look how similar those all look. Swiss chard and beets are actually the same exact plant. They're just different varieties. One is bred for the leaves and one is bred for the roots. That's another plant family that is great to plant directly outside in the garden around mid-April. So yeah, I think that is most of what a seed packet can tell you, but really it lays it all out. It also shows you different planting zones. So if you look at these different colors on the map, that's telling you the different times that you can plant these depending on where in the country you are. So just because this is true in Madison, Wisconsin, does not mean if you're in Georgia, this is the same plan for you. So make sure you know your own climate and your own growing zone when you're gonna be planting. So, because it is tomato and pepper planting time in the greenhouse over here, we're going to walk by some of these little babies and just revel in the miracle of popping a seed in the ground and it grows into food for you as we walk by, so I could show you how we plant. So we have peppers popping up over here, little baby peppers. And when a seedling first starts to pop up, you can see it's got two leaves. Those are called the seed leaves or cotyledons. Those are usually a different shape than the leaves that come next. You do not want to plant a plant out into the garden until it has at least one set of true leaves. So keep an eye for that too. All right, so over here, you can see this greenhouse is full up because we're planting not only for Badgerock, we're also, Troy Farm is also doing their seeding in here. We have our students seeding in here. It's all happening. So one thing you need is some pots. You can either use plastic pots or you can use decomposable pots. And you need some potting mix. You can get potting mix from pretty much any hardware store, any garden store. I usually avoid the potting mix that's got synthetic fertilizer in it. You don't need all that. We don't need to be adding any kind of man-made chemicals into our soil. The seed itself has enough food within the seed for that little seedling to start growing. You don't need a lot unless your seedling is going to be in the pot for a long time. Then you might consider adding some organic fertilizer. But the first step is just to fill your trays, and you want to leave that soil nice and light and fluffy. You don't want to pack it in. You want it nice and light so that when those new baby roots start to grow, they really can easily get down into that soil. There's plenty of airspace for them to get oxygen, and there's plenty of airspace for the water to get down in there. Then I just put the seeds on top of the soil like so. And I usually just do this first and get a seed in every cell so that I don't forget where I stopped. And then you can just literally poke them under the soil. The seeds only need to really be planted about twice as deep as the seed is big. So you can imagine for these tiny little tomato seeds, not too deep. And don't forget, one seed grows into one whole tomato plant. So you don't want to put 20 seeds in here because you'll have 20 little tomato plants trying to all grow in the same tiny little thing. And these are going to be plants to get like 5 feet tall and 3 feet big. So give them the space that they need to grow. And just poke them under there, keep them watered. We water in our greenhouse every day, but depending on how much light and how much humidity you have, you might not need to water them every single day. Keep an eye. Make sure they're moist, like a wrung out sponge is about what you're going for water-wise. And then if they start getting big enough that you can pull them out of the pot and the roots are starting to circle around the edges of the pot, that means they need to be moved into a bigger pot. That's called up-potting or transplanting, and we'll do another workshop on that down the road when we get to that point in the growing season. But if you're starting your own seeds, happy beginning of the growing season. It's such an exciting time. It's a miraculous time, to be honest, to be in here when everything is popping, even while winter is still going on outside. So get your seeds in. If you want to join us for an in-person seed starting workshop, we have one coming up Saturday, March 21st from 2 to 4 p.m. right here in the Badgerock Greenhouse. It'll be headed up by Forrest Smart and Kaylin Brennan on our farm and education team. So come on out and get some seeds planted in person, meet some friends, meet some plant friends in here. There's a lot going on. and enjoy the company and the green of super early spring. So I forgot something really important, y'all. So I'm back to tell you that really quick. You need to label your trays. We have many times in this greenhouse, I would say almost every year, we have mystery plants. We can recognize what they are because once you grow a seedling a couple times, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's a tomato. But what kind of tomato? You may have no clue if you don't label it, even if you think you're going to remember. So make sure you label your trays and make sure you put the date on it too. So for example, right here, we just use painter's tape and we put a piece of tape right on the edge of our tray. And then we also put a stick in the soil. That way, if somebody's walking by and they just kind of like grab that stick and walk on by and your stick disappears, you still know what you planted because you have that tape on there. So just popping back on to say, don't forget to label your plants. And yeah, they will be so happy that you did, and you will be happy too. See you next time.